Hi folks, this is Brittany Corrigan. Welcome to Some of Each, episode 7. Some of Each, in which I read to you from some fiction, some poetry, and some children's lit on a specific theme each week. And this week's theme is Leviathan. So, welcome. I'm going to start with some fiction for you. Can't really do a theme show about Leviathan without reading from Moby Dick. And I have to admit, I've actually never read Moby Dick in its entirety, and I enjoyed this week going through and finding a passage, and I can see why people love this book. The language is amazing, but also so dense. So I'm going to read to you, which is fitting for a Leviathan. So I'm going to read to you just like 2.5 pages, because it really is pretty dense. So from Moby Dick, by Herman Melville. I'm going to start out with chapter 41. You can see this book was from my little free library. It's totally falling apart. So this is from chapter 41 entitled Moby Dick. I, Ishmael, was one of that crew. My shouts had gone up with the rest. My oath had been welded with theirs, and stronger I shouted, and more did I hammer and clinch my oath because of the dread in my soul. A wild, mystical, sympathetical feeling was in me. Ahab's quenchless feud seemed mine. With greedy ears I learned the history of that murderous monster against whom I and all the others had taken our oaths of violence and revenge. For some time past, though at intervals only, the unaccompanied, secluded white whale had haunted those uncivilized seas most frequented by the sperm whale fishermen. But not all of them knew of his existence. Only a few of them, comparatively, had knowingly seen him, while the number who as yet had actually and knowingly given battle to him was small indeed. For, owing to the large number of whale cruisers, the disorderly way they were sprinkled over the entire watery circumference, many of them adventurously pushing their quest along solitary latitudes, so as seldom or never for a whole 12-month or more on a stretch to encounter a single news-telling sail of any sort. The inordinate length of each separate voyage, the irregularity of the times of sailing from home, all these, with other circumstances, direct and indirect, long obstructed the spread through the whole wide world whaling fleet of the special individualizing tidings concerning Moby Dick. It was hardly to be doubted that several vessels reported to have encountered at such or such a time, or on such and such a meridian, a sperm whale of uncommon magnitude and malignity, which whale, after doing great mischief to his assailants, had completely escaped them. To some minds it was not an unfair presumption, I say, that the whale in question must have been no other than Moby Dick. Yet, as of late, the sperm whale fishery had been marked by various and not infrequent instances of great ferocity, cunning, and malice in the monster attacked. Therefore it was that those who by accident ignorantly gave battle to Moby Dick, such hunters perhaps, for the most part, were content to ascribe the peculiar terror he bred more, as it were, to the perils of the sperm whale fishery at large than to the individual cause. In that way, mostly, the disastrous encounter between Ahab and the whale had hitherto been popularly regarded. And as for those who, previously hearing of the white whale, by chance caught sight of him, in the beginning of the thing they had every one of them almost as boldly and fearlessly lowered for him as for any other whale of that species. But at length, such calamities did ensue in these assaults, not restricted to sprained wrists and ankles, broken limbs, or devouring amputations, but fatal to the last degree of fatality. Those repeated disastrous repulses, all accumulating and piling their terrors upon Moby Dick. Those things had gone far to shake the fortitude of many brave hunters to whom the story of the white whale had eventually come. Nor did wild rumors of all sorts fail to exaggerate, and still the more horrify the true histories of these deadly encounters. For not only do fabulous rumors naturally grow of the very body of all surprising, terrible events, as the smitten tree gives birth to its fungi, but in maritime life, far more than in that of terra firma, wild rumors abound, wherever there is any adequate reality for them to cling to. And as the sea surpasses the land in this matter, so the whale fishery surpasses every other sort of maritime life in the wonderfulness and fearfulness of the rumors which sometimes circulate there. For not only are whalemen as a body unexempt from that ignorance and superstitiousness hereditary to all sailors, but of all sailors, they are by all odds the most directly brought into contact with whatever is appallingly astonishing in the sea. Face to face, they not only eye its greatest marvels, but hand to jaw give battle to them. Alone, in such remotest waters, and though you sailed 1,000 miles and passed 1,000 shores, you would not come to any chiseled hearthstone or aught hospitable beneath that part of the sun. In such latitudes and longitudes, pursuing too such a calling as he does, the whaleman is wrapped by influences all tending to make his fancy pregnant with many a mighty birth. No wonder, then, that ever-gathering volume from the mere transit over the widest watery spaces, the outblown rumors of the white whale did in the end incorporate with themselves all manner of morbid hints and half-formed fetal suggestions of supernatural agencies, which eventually invested Moby Dick with the new terrors unborrowed from anything that visibly appears. So that, in many cases, such a panic did he finally strike, that few who by those rumors at least had heard of the white whale, few of those hunters were willing to encounter the perils of his jaw. So that is a little hint of Moby Dick. The original Leviathan, I think. All right, so I've got several poems for you tonight. It's going to be a mostly poetry evening. So I'm going to start with a poem from this book, Oceanic, by Aimee I totally rehearsed her name ahead of time, but Nezhukumatathil. This book's called Oceanic, and I'm just going to read you one poem from this. So originally, I was going to do Shark Week, which I thought would be great, but I didn't have enough shark poems myself. So I went with Leviathan. So you're going to get some whales and some really big sharks. So from Oceanic, Aimee Nezhukumatathil, I Could Be a Whale Shark. And this is set in Bolinao, Philippines. I am worried about tentacles. How you can still get stung even if the jelly arm disconnects from the bell. My husband swims without me, farther out to sea than I would like, buoyed by salt and rind of kelp. I am worried if I step too far into the China Sea, my baby will slow the beautiful kicks he has just begun since we landed. The quickening, they call it. But all I am is slow, a moon jelly floating like a bag in the sea. Or a whale shark. Yes, I could be a whale shark, newly spotted with moles from the pregnancy, my wide mouth always open to eat and eat with a look that says, "Surprise, did I eat that much?" When I sleep, I am a flute fish, just lying there, swaying back and forth among the kelpy mess of sheets. You can see the wet of my dark eye awake, awake. My husband is a pale blur near the horizon, full of adobo and not waiting 30 minutes before swimming. He is free and waves at me as he backstrokes past. This is how he prepares for fatherhood. Such tenderness still lingers in the air. The Roman poet Virgil gave his pet fly the most lavish funeral, complete with meat feast and barrels of oaky wine. You can never know where or why you hear a humming on this soft earth. So that is If I Could Be or I Could Be a Whale Shark by Aimee Nezhukumatathil from Oceanic. All right. So just a couple little singlets here now for you. This is on our giant shark theme so far. This is The Basking Shark, and the poem is by Carrie, and it's in the most recent issue of the Split Rock Review, which side I'm also in. So, but this is Carrie, The Basking Shark. The basking shark roams the ocean, jaw unhinged, trolling for tiny plankton to filter through its gills and fuel its bulk. It looks silly, really, bordering on foolish, its endless pelagic migration guided by a mouth embarrassingly large, even for its enormous body. But its shameless display of desire is admirable in its honesty. Think of the time we'd save if we accepted our cravings and pursued them so unabashedly. Dating, for instance, would be a much simpler process. No more agonizing, no more he loves me not. If his mouth doesn't fall open at the sight of you brushing your hair, cut ties and recommence roving the earth in search of what feeds your heart. So that's The Basking Shark by Carrie in the most recent issue of the Split Rock Review. All right. I'll read you another little single here. This one's by Marjorie Saiser, and the poem is called The Print the Whales Make. And it's from her book, I Have Nothing to Say About Fire. The print the whales make. You and I on the boat notice the print the whales leave, the huge ring their diving draws for a time on the surface. Is it like that when we lose one another? Don't know, can't. But I want to believe when we can no longer walk across a room for a hug, can no longer step into the arms of the other, there will be this, some trace that stays while the great body remains below, out of sight. Dark mammoth shadow, flick of flipper, body of delight, diving deep. So that's The Print the Whales Make by Marjorie Saiser from I Have Nothing to Say About Fire. So now I'm going to read to you, I've got 3 of my own poems for you tonight on the subject of whales, Leviathan. So this first one, this is from my chapbook Breaking, which is still looking for a publisher, and this is all poems that have to do with stories in the news that have happened over the last several years. So this one I actually wrote, I can see that Bonnie's out there watching, and Bonnie, I actually wrote this while I was a dorm mom for you at mineral school. And so this one, that week when I was at mineral school that summer, was the same summer that the mother orca, Tahlequah, J35, was carrying, I'm sure most of you have heard the story, was carrying her dead calf on her back for more than 2 weeks. And it was also the same summer, this was the summer of 2018, when we were separating immigrant families at the U.S. border with Mexico. So this poem came out of those 2 things happening simultaneously, that in late July and August of 2018. It's called The Carrying. And it has a little epigraph. Grief and love don't belong to us. We share it with other animals. That was from an article by Barbara King. The Carrying. We cannot see the bottom of a heart pooled up with loss, or chart the weight of what is empty, its heavy press. What we see is the dead orca calf balanced on its mother's rostrum, how deep she dives to retrieve it each time it falls off. We watch the circular surfacing of the female whales keeping vigil near the moonlit cove, lapped by the Salish Sea. We dare not take the orca calf away. Fiercely, we protect this ritual of carrying. empathy surfacing in our veins. We can say she's pushing through a 4-knot current with labored breaths. We can say her baby has been dead 4 days. When we say this, the blood in our own hearts leadens. The orcas are better than we are at buoying up our own. We watch how the human mothers carry their children from harm, endangered hearts pulsing with fear and love. We can say they are pushing through forbidden borders with labored breaths. We can say they have been traveling for days. What we see is the children wrenched from their mother's arms, the families in a tight circling, the sinking to their knees. The mother whale falls behind the others. We see her and weep. The tide is against us. The children slip and slip and slip away. It's the carrying. All right, so I'm going to read you 2 more little whale poems. So this one's from my current manuscript that deals with things in the Anthropocene and our relationship to the earth and its beings. So this is from a series, if you've been tuning in, you've heard some others of these. These are my Anthropocene blessings, which are written for a variety of different endangered species. So this one is Anthropocene Blessing, Blue Whale. May your automobile-sized heart, pulsing in the chassis of your massive floating form, claim a new comparison. One not skeletoned of plastic and steel, profuse with oil, but deserving of your fringed and seething jaws, the reach of your resonant moans. May you always be the largest, the longest lived. Leave us treading, exhausted in your wake. So that's Anthropocene Blessing, Blue Whale. I'm going to read you one more of my whale poems. This one's also from this manuscript. And this one is called Whale Fall, which, for those of you who don't know, a whale fall is when the body of a dead whale naturally sinks to the bottom of the ocean, and it actually creates an entire ecosystem unto itself. And there's some animals that live only on whale falls, and it takes years and years and years for them to fully decompose. And in that time, there's a whole world of life that comes up around that body. So this is called Whale Fall. The ocean's innumerable tiny mouths await the muffled impact like baby birds. Sediment clouds up at the deadened settling, and the flesh is set upon. How the weight of loss can be beautiful in its opening. Luminous worms undulate like party streamers as isopods and lobsters arrive to feast. This body holds an ecosystem unto itself, species found nowhere else but here, cleaved to the sunken remains. Sleeper sharks move in slow and gentle, ease the messy carcass to gleaming bones. And then, how the skeletal rafters of grief fuzz and bloom. How sometimes the coldest depths allow for such measured undoing. All the while, hungry lives swarm and spread, come to stay. Limpets attached to the unhidden core. Sorrow in its abundance crushes, cycles, feeds. How the body rests, rich in what sustains. It's Whale Fall. And you can actually find that one online in this lovely journal called Talia. They did a little interview with me, and that poem appears in that issue online along with some others, so if you're interested. All right, so I'm going to close with a story from Rudyard Kipling from the Just So stories. Fitting. And of course, we're going to read How the Whale Got His Throat. In the sea, Once upon a time, oh, my best beloved, there was a whale, and he ate fishes. He ate the starfish and the garfish and the crab and the dab and the plaice and the dace and the skate and his mate and the mackerel and the pickerel and the really truly twirly whirly eel. All the fishes he could find in the sea he ate with his mouth, so, till at last there was only one small fish left in all the sea, and he was a small 'stute fish, and he swam a little behind the whale's right ear, so as to be out of harm's way. Then the whale stood up on his tail and said, "I'm hungry." And the small 'stute fish said in a small 'stute voice, "Noble and generous cetacean, have you ever tasted man?" "No," said the whale. "What is it like?" "Nice," said the small 'stute fish. "Nice, but nubbly." "Then fetch me some," said the whale, and he made the sea froth up with his tail. "One at a time is enough," said the 'stute fish. "If you swim to latitude 50 north, longitude 40 west, that is magic, you will find sitting on a raft in the middle of the sea with nothing on but a pair of blue canvas breeches, a pair of suspenders, you must not forget the suspenders, best beloved, and a jackknife, one shipwrecked mariner who, it is only fair to tell you, is a man of infinite resource and sagacity." So the whale swam and swam to latitude 50 north, longitude 40 west, as fast as he could swim, and on a raft, in the middle of the sea, with nothing to wear except a pair of blue canvas breeches, a pair of suspenders, you must particularly remember the suspenders, best beloved, and a jackknife, he found one single solitary shipwrecked mariner trailing his toes in the water. He had his mummy's leave to paddle, or else he would never have done it, because he was a man of infinite resource and sagacity. Then the whale opened his mouth back and back and back till it nearly touched his tail, and he swallowed the shipwrecked mariner, and the raft he was sitting on, and his blue canvas breeches, and the suspenders, which you must not forget, and the jackknife. He swallowed them all down into his warm, dark inside cupboards, and then he smacked his lips so, and turned round 3 times on his tail. But as soon as the mariner, who was a man of infinite resource and sagacity, found himself truly inside the whale's warm, dark inside cupboards, he stumped and jumped and thumped, and he bumped and he pranced and he danced and he banged and he clanged and he hit and he bit and he leaped and he creeped and he prowled and he howled and he hopped and he dropped and he cried and he sighed and he crawled and he bawled and he stepped and he leapt and he danced hornpipes where he shouldn't, and the whale felt most unhappy indeed. Have you forgotten the suspenders? So he said to the 'stute fish, "This man is very nubbly, and besides he is making me hiccup. What shall I do?" "Tell him to come out," said the 'stute fish. So the whale called down his own throat to the shipwrecked mariner, "Come out and behave yourself. I've got the hiccups." So I have to stop and show you a picture first of the whale swallowing the mariner, and of course there's a little aside. This is the picture of the whale swallowing the mariner with its infinite resource and sagacity, and the raft and the jackknife and his suspenders, which you must not forget. The buttony things are the mariner's suspenders, and you can see the knife close by them. He is sitting on the raft, but it is tilted up sideways, so you don't see much of it. The witty thing by the mariner's left hand is a piece of wood that he was trying to row the raft with when the whale came along. The piece of wood is called the jaws of a gaff. The mariner left it outside when he went in. The whale's name was Smiler, and the mariner was called Mr. Henry Albert Bivens, A.B. The little 'stute fish is hiding under the whale's tummy, or else I would have drawn him. The reason that the sea looks so ooshy-cushy is because the whale is sucking it all into his mouth, so as to suck Mr. Henry Albert Bivens and the raft and the jackknife and the suspenders. You must never forget the suspenders. Where were we? "Tell him to come out," said the 'stute fish. So the whale called down his own throat to the shipwrecked mariner, "Come out and behave yourself. I've got the hiccups." "Nay, nay," said the mariner, "not so, but far otherwise. Take me to my natal shore and the white cliffs of Albion, and I'll think about it." And he began to dance more than ever. "You had better take him home," said the 'stute fish to the whale. "I ought to have warned you that he is a man of infinite resource and sagacity." So the whale swam and swam and swam with both flippers and his tail as hard as he could for the hiccups, and at last he saw the mariner's natal shore and the white cliffs of Albion. And he rushed halfway up the beach and opened his mouth wide and wide and wide and said, "Change here for Winchester, Ashalot, and Ashuakeen, and stations on the Fitchburg Road." And just as he said Fitch, the mariner walked out of his mouth. But while the whale had been swimming, the mariner, who was indeed a person of infinite resource and sagacity, had taken his jackknife and cut up the raft into a little square grating all running crisscross, and he had tied it firm with his suspenders. Now you know why you were not to forget the suspenders. And he dragged that grating good and tight into the whale's throat, and there it stuck. Then he recited the following sloka, which, as you have not heard it, I will now proceed to relate. By means of a grating, I have stopped your aiding. For the mariner was also a Hibernian, and he stepped out onto the shingle and went home to his mother, who had given him leave to trail his toes in the water. And he married and lived happily ever afterward. So did the whale. But from that day on, the grating in his throat, which he could neither cough up nor swallow down, prevented him eating anything except very, very small fish. And that is the reason why whales nowadays never eat men or boys or little girls. Here's another picture. And another aside. Here is the whale, looking at the little 'stute fish who was hiding under the doorsills of the equator. The little 'stute fish's name was Pingle. He is hiding among the roots of the big seaweed that grows in front of the doors of the equator. I have drawn the doors of the equator. They are shut. They are always kept shut, because a door ought always to be kept shut. The ropey thing right across is the equator itself, and the things that look like rocks are the two giants, Moore and Core, that keep the equator in order. They drew the shadow pictures on the doors of the equator, and they carved all those twisty fishes into the doors. The beaky fish are called beaked dolphins, and the other fish with the queer heads are called hammer-headed sharks. The whale never found the little 'stute fish till he got over his temper, and then they became good friends again. Where were we? That is the reason why whales nowadays never eat men or boys or little girls. The small 'stute fish went and hid himself in the mud under the door sills of the equator. He was afraid that the whale might be angry with him. The sailor took the jackknife home. He was wearing the blue canvas breeches when he walked out on the shingle. The suspenders were left behind, you see, to tie the grating with, and that is the end of that tale. So that was how the whale got his throat, from Rudyard Kipling's Just So stories. So in addition to Rudyard Kipling, we heard tonight some of my poems. We also heard poems from Marjorie Saiser from I Have Nothing to Say About Fire, and Carrie Connors from the issue most recently of the Split Rock Review. Also from Oceanic by Aimee Nezhukumatathil. And of course, Herman Melville's Moby Dick. So if you like what you heard tonight, I hope you'll order the books from your local bookstore and support them with either online orders or curbside pickup, and help writers and little bookstores get through this difficult time. So thanks very much to listening to Some of Each, Episode 7, Leviathan, and I will see you all next week. Good night.